Hello people of the Earth and welcome back to QuickSaveTV. My name is Mike and today we're going to take a look at the Skirmisher class from the XCOM 2 War of the Chosen DLC. Now, what is the Skirmisher? How does it work? Skirmisher is an ex-Advent soldier that was specifically manufactured as a hybrid between human and alien DNA to serve as essentially a foot soldier for the elders. They did not have free will because of the chip implanted into their brain, but due to certain anomalies or abnormalities or just malfunctioning of the chip, they sometimes regain free will. And when they do, all hell breaks loose. And that's what Skirmisher is. Their leader, Betos, was the first of her kind. Their goal is to protect their kind, to make sure that elders will never do something like this to any other race ever again. Essentially, they're as much of this earth as anyone else. So, they are also people of the earth. As weird as it sounds, right? They're also one of us. Now, in terms of, let's take a look at their abilities in great detail. Now, the first and most important thing, right? What is their equipment? From the start, from the get-go, they cannot use any other armor in the core version of the game, but they can use the grappling hook from their original armor, which allows them to have unparalleled mobility from the very start of the game, if you have them as early as possible, right? They also have two abilities called Marauder and Justice. Now, grappling hook doesn't require an introduction. You can use it to flank enemies, to move around the battlefield. It does not consume an action point, has 3 turns cooldown, and it is exceptionally powerful. Oh, two turns. Yeah, it's essentially 3 turns. With like every 3 turns you can use it. It is really powerful to accelerate your movement around the map. It can save you up to 2 action points easily, and it also allows you to quickly reposition to get the height advantage on the enemy to get higher hit chance, and to make sure that you're flanking them. That's a really powerful ability. It does not require an introduction. Now, Justice and the Marauder are also really powerful abilities. Marauder allows you to not end your turn with a basic attack. When you have more than 2 action points, this can turn into a massacre, because this guy will never stop fighting until you're fucking dead. It's very scary, actually. It's a very powerful ability. Justice allows you to pull the enemy from his cover towards yourself and slam them with the Ripjack that is equipped on the right hand of the Skirmisher. That's a melee weapon, and essentially the secondary equipment that they have is the melee weapon. So in that regard, their primary weapon is very similar to the shotgun of the Ranger, and their melee weapon is very similar to the sword of the Ranger, but also very different in many regards. But in a sense, Skirmisher is a variation of a Ranger class, a very powerful, close quarters combatant that is able, when it matters, to push himself and others to the limit and annihilate superior force that trying to stop him. That's a very interesting class to have, and let's take a look at other abilities. So you have 3 trees, right? Hussar, Judge, and Tactician. Now, Hussar is focusing on using his abilities with his rifle to push himself and his allies to the limit as he attempts to annihilate the enemy opposition. Judge focuses primarily on using the Ripjack and various Ripjack abilities to make sure that the enemy not only cannot withstand the barrage of the Bull-pup firepower, but also to pull them back, pull himself to them, and make sure to just seed chaos on the field of battle. Tactician allows you to get various utility abilities, with the ultimate being Judgment. That basically, it's hilarious, right? The enemy fires at you, the Skirmisher turns around and shouts, "I shall never be defeated by the likes of you," and the enemy fucking runs away, scared shitless, panicking. I've had mutants running away from my Skirmishers, and I mean, that's saying something, alright? Let's take a closer look at all the abilities. Reflex is one of the strongest abilities on the Skirmisher tree, but there's a disadvantage. It can only be activated once per mission, but it's a very powerful ability that allows you to take a essentially it allows you to take an extra action point per turn, which means that you can fire an additional time, use one of your melee abilities, maybe use a grenade if you so desire. It's a very powerful ability, especially combined with the Marauder or Total Combat. It's a very strong ability to have. Combat Presence allows you to inspire your squad mate to have one extra turn. a super powerful ability, especially when you have a lot of rookies on your team or a lot of lower, like weak classes. You can inspire them to move once again, and by that you can gain an advantage on the field of battle. It's a very strong ability, do not overlook it. The other ability is the Waylay, which allows you to utilize every single ability point when you go on Overwatch. Now, on paper it sounds fantastic, and it is, right? Without exception, it is a great ability, but there is a problem. It essentially converts your action points into additional shots on Overwatch, but Skirmisher is so much better when you attack, not when you Overwatch. Overwatching on a Skirmisher is fine, right? It's just as fine to Overwatch on Ranger, but both specialize in assaulting enemy position, right? Or in breaking the enemy encampment. This ability does nothing to do that. I'm not a huge fan of this ability. If you like, you can use it, but it's definitely not the strongest that Skirmisher has to offer. It's very good in its own right, and it can be very good in certain scenarios, especially when you have, let's say, a proc of Reflex and you go to the Waylay, right? It can be really cool when you're taking a high ground, but definitely not a big fan. Manual Override allows you to lower the cooldown of your other abilities by 1 turn, which is not as weak as it sounds. It's actually an ultimate ability. It allows you to have your Wrath, Whiplash, Justice, Reckoning, right? All of these abilities. I think Combat Presence is a charge-based ability. Again, it's a very, very strong addition to your inventory. Do not overlook it. It's really, really good. It allows Skirmisher to enter in the following battle, again, refreshed, quicker than he would be otherwise, which is really important, because all of his other abilities are incredibly powerful. I only wish Manual Override actually refreshed the Reflex. That would be fucking insane, right? I would fucking marry this ability, to be honest. Now, the Judge Tree. Probably my favorite, but there's a lot of things to like about this class, so I cannot be sure. Justice, and the ability that allows you to throw the hook at the enemy and pull him back to you. You cannot pull a lot of enemies back to you. For example, you cannot pull back sectoids. You cannot pull back vipers, right? You can mostly pull back Advent soldiers, which is really useful against Advent officer and Advent priest, right? It's very useful against the Advent stun lancer as well in certain scenarios. But when in situations when you cannot do that, Wrath will do just fine. Wrath pulls you towards the enemy, right? It's the opposite of the previous ability, but it's just as powerful. Especially when you have the Ionic Creepjack that stuns the target. It's a very, very powerful ability. Do not overlook it. Whiplash is also a really great ability, but it has certain limitations. Typically, Skirmisher is really bad against robotic enemies because of the damage that his rifle deals. He really needs someone to penetrate the armor first, otherwise he will be completely useless. Because of the low damage of his rifle, of his Bull-pup rifle, he cannot easily penetrate the enemy armor without special ammunition. So Whiplash suffers from a similar condition. Whiplash does double damage to robotic enemies, but it does not penetrate armor. So you can see the problem right there, right? So it does 6 damage, and it's 12 against robotic enemy, but if the enemy is, let's say a gatekeeper or a sectopod, it's not really good. But just having just having 6 extra damage for free is a very, very powerful addition, because this does not require an action, which makes it really powerful. But it only has 1 turn per match. Per mission, excuse me. Now, Retribution is very powerful ability. It's just like the alternative ability of the Hunter. It allows you to attack the enemy in melee when he attacks you. The only problem is that Skirmisher doesn't really have high accuracy stat, so this ability misses quite often, but it's still a very powerful addition to your inventory. It allows you to much easier deal with many targets, such as Chrysalids, such as Berserkers, such as Stun Lancers, many of them, right? Advent Priests as well, so it's a very good thing to pick up. Reckoning allows you to run towards the enemy and hit them with your Creepjack, which is a really good ability to move around. And one thing I noticed, I don't know if it's a bug or I broke it with my mods, I'm not sure, but it seems that it doesn't consume all of my action points, which is interesting. So I can dash, I do a double dash, I do a melee attack, and then I fucking bury him with lead with my Bull-pup rifle. Reckoning is a really powerful ability, but the biggest downside to this ability is that you're walking, so it's not super good, so it activates Overwatch and such, and it has a massive 5-turn cooldown, which is fucking, honestly, it's fucking insane. But when your Wrath and Justice are on cooldown, Reckoning will do just fine in a pitch. Also important to note, Wrath also activates enemy Overwatch. So when you reach the enemy destination, you're going to be shot at, so you have to be really, really careful. And the next ability is Battle Lord. Now, Battle Lord allows you to, after each enemy in your line of sight takes a turn, you can take an immediate action. I have not found it extremely useful, but maybe I'm just a retard, right? If you do, tell me in comments. It sounds good on paper, but in most of the situations I'm like, okay, I'm not sure why I would do that, you know? So I'm not a big fan of this. I really prefer manual override and judgment. Maybe it's my playstyle, maybe I just couldn't figure it out, so I'm not sure. Next is the last but not least, it's a really good tree too, in certain aspects, Tactician tree. The first ability that's available to you is Total Combat. Not a big fan of this one. It allows you to use grenades and items and does not end your turn. So essentially it adds grenades and items to the Marauder skill, right? Not only your shots not end your turn, but also using, you know, items does not end your turn. Now, the reason I'm not a big fan of this is most of the times you can survive without it. You can use your item on the last turn, but I mean, I can see situations when it's really good. But, you know, honestly, it's not a critical skill to have, I'll be honest with you, right? Zero In is insane. Honestly, it's really, really good. So, when you have 3 action points combined with reflex, right? So 2 plus 1, you have 3, and you use the Zero In, which is a passive ability. Every subsequent shot in a turn, it gives you plus 10% crit chance, right? So the third shot will have plus 20% crit chance. The only problem with your rifle is that it doesn't have crit chance by default, but when you hit a flanked enemy, it's a really, really good situation for you, and this ability further amplifies it. But also, when you shoot the same target repeatedly, which is especially important when you fight Chosen, Sectopod, Gatekeepers, Andromedon, essentially any target that is fucking fat, right? You want to have this ability. This is really, really useful when you try to kill those thick enemies, right? Full Throttle, again, not a big fan of this ability. The more kills you accrue, the more mobility you get for this turn. Which is good if you want to move at the end of your turn, but most of the times I just want to use all of my abilities to shoot, you know, to be honest with you. And it's really useful when you fight against the Lost, because you can accrue a lot of kills with the Lost. But as I said again, I'm not a big fan of this. If you figure out a good situation to use it, go for it, right? But it's just that, generally speaking, moving after I kill a bunch of guys is not first on my list of priorities, so that's why I don't use it. Now, Interrupt is actually pretty fun. It allows you, instead of just firing at the enemy, it allows you to perform any single action with certain limitations, like you cannot Overwatch and stuff like that. But yeah, as it says here, you cannot Overwatch. It's a really powerful ability. It's not something I would take over Retribution or Combat Presence. Those two I think are superior. But Interrupt can be good in certain situations. It allows you more flexibility, and it allows you to respond just the way you want to respond. Instead of just firing at the guy and probably missing too, because the chance to hit is just so abysmally low. And the last one, but not least, my favorite ability, honestly, Judgment. It's the ultimate skill of the Tactician tree. Judgment is OP, right? It's not really OP, it's insane, right? Whenever an enemy attacks you, Skirmisher shouts at him and has a good chance to panic the enemy. Which looks legendary, but it's also really useful because it creates even more chaos on the field of battle. I don't think there's anything more to say about it. This is the core tree of the Skirmisher. The additional abilities, right? Tactical Rigging is really nice, especially if you want to use Total Combat. Having more things is really nice, but it's also really good if you want to have, let's say, a Mind Shield and a bullets, and a special ammo type, which I'll explain why it's good in just a moment. Return Fire is really good, again, because you're a specialist of melee combat, right? Of close quarters combat. Whenever an enemy hits you, you get the reflex, right? Once per match, and then you have the Return Fire every time they attack you. which means that Skirmisher is incredibly difficult to take down without casualties, incredibly difficult just to tackle, you know, what a pain in the ass. And then you go the Lightning Reflexes, right? Lightning Reflexes is really good. It's a ranger skill. No, hold up, it's not. Yeah, it's like a ranger, it's like a assault skill from the previous game. I think it's from a mod, right? But anything that allows you to survive more or to be able to rush the enemy positions, it's a really good ability. Volatile mix is probably one of the worst things that are available to Skirmisher. I'm not a big fan of that. It allows you to deal more damage with grenades. But honestly, you don't want to be a discount grenadier. It's not what you want to be, because there's a lot of things Skirmisher does that Grenadier could not even dream of conceptually. So you don't want to do something like that. And this is also a mod thing. So I think this one is a mod thing, but this definitely is not. So yeah, so this is the ability. So once again, TLDR. Skirmisher is the master of CQC combat. When you have to stand and fight, and if you have, let's say, limited team of 3 members and you have to complete the mission, Skirmisher is the man or woman for the job. They will do it no matter the cost, no matter how fucking tall the gates, how strong the opposition. They will fight till the last, and they will break the enemy defenses, whatever the cost. Now, let's switch to the weaponry, and let's take a look at the loadout really quickly. We talked about the armor, you cannot change it to anything else. Your weapon, again, you cannot change it to anything else. It's the Bull-pup type of weapon. It starts off really weak, but it scales really well to late game. But there's one problem that is persistent with it. It does not have crit chance by default. It has only 3 bullets. Second weakness, 3 bullets. 3 shots, right? And the other weakness is that... I mentioned crit, 3 bullets, no crit, 3 bullets, and it has the shotgun range table, right? Which can be really, really good in certain situations, and it's generally really good for Skirmisher, for what you're trying to accomplish. But when you have to fight in a more normal scenario, Skirmisher is actually really weak. Combined with very low aim of Skirmishers, it can be a really devastating situation. Now, for 1 equipment slot, or if you have 2 equipment slots, right? My favorite thing is the blue screen rounds. Tracer rounds are also really good, but my favorite, absolute favorite, is Viper rounds, right? Viper rounds are fucking aids for the enemy to deal with, and because you have several shots to take every turn, just having any rounds is a good idea, because your primary source of power is not only your CQC mastery, right, but also your ability to use your Bull-pup so very efficiently. Now let's try to figure out how can we upgrade the weaponry, and we'll try to figure out what kind of upgrades will be so good on the Skirmisher. My absolute 2 favorites are this: the superior hair trigger, because you fire again and again. It's a really good thing, right? So you have additional chance to fire. You can fire 3 times in a turn. Imagine, even 4 if you use teamwork skill, right? And each of these chances will have 20% chance, right? Imagine, it's such a powerful ability. Sometimes you will proc it back to back to back. It's insane, honestly, what you can do with this. The next one is the Repeater. Repeater is absolutely devastating on this guy, because your base damage is not very high, right? But you fire all the time, and having a chance to kill the guy whenever you do is absolutely fucking devastating. And the third thing that I could recommend to you is Autoloader or Expanded Magazine, right? Both are really good in my opinion, because the 3 bullets is just not enough. Autoloader is better in certain situations, Expanded Magazine is better in other situations. You'll have to figure it out. Me personally, I prefer Expanded Magazine because it allows me to fight in extended fights, while Superior Autoloader is better when you have to fight Codex, when you have to not break your stride and quickly advance at the enemy positions, but be able to reload your gun immediately to be able to fight once again. Superior Laser Sight can be really good, but then you don't have any ammo addition, right? You might want to sacrifice on something else. It's really good with one of your abilities that increases your crit chance, and it also allows you to have increased crit chance when you hit a flanked enemy. Having crit is also a really good thing. Now, Superior Stock is really good, right? Superior Scope is also really good. Like, as you can see, a lot of the things are really good. But honestly, the 2 best things are Hair Trigger and Repeater, for reasons I just mentioned. You fire your gun all the time, being able to fire your gun more and have a chance to one-shot the enemy, incredibly powerful. Now, this is the weapon. Before I lose my voice, let's go to the PCS, the final piece of the puzzle. If I have to recommend, I would say do not go Will. Will is probably the least useful for the Skirmisher. One of my favorites is definitely dodge and aim. The base aim of Skirmisher is really fucking low. So having an ability to put up the aim stat, take a look, 94, right? It's massive now. It's fucking devastating. It will allow you to ignore the low cover of the enemy, and combined with the range table of your Bull-pup, which works essentially like a shotgun, it will allow you to advance on the enemy positions and actually take more of those shots and connect more of them. And will also improve your accuracy in melee, which is really important. Because having low accuracy is just such a bad thing, such a punishing factor. So probably the best one I can recommend is having the accuracy. So the superior perception is probably the best. But speed is really good for obvious reasons. Just being faster is always a good idea. Being able to dodge more is really good. Having more HP can be really nice. But honestly, the best and brightest will probably go for the perception. If you'd have to go for one of them, this is the choice you'd have to go for. So this has been my take on the guide for Skirmisher. I don't think I missed anything. If I did, please ask your questions. I will be happy to answer them. I have combined over 600 kills on all of my Skirmishers across 3 playthroughs of this game that I've completed. 1 on normal difficulty, 2 on commander difficulty. I have very extensive experience with Skirmishers. I love this class. I think it's absolutely amazing. I don't think it's broken, but I think if you use it correctly, this class can feel absolutely overpowering and impossible to deal with. I thank you so much for watching and listening. This has been Mike with QuickSaveTV. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.